Hi, I'm C.C. Péan, and this is Reclaiming Your Health. Hey everyone, welcome to Reclaiming Your Health. I am your host, C.C. Péan, and I'm so excited to be here with you tonight as I am every week. We have such a unique and simple dish tonight that I'm excited to share with you. You all may have read about it, you may have heard about it. I know that you have seen cauliflower everywhere. Cauliflower steaks, deep fried, cauliflower, cauliflower buffalo wings, all these things that are being done with cauliflower. And it's great because we're just being creative with what God has given us naturally. But tonight, I'm going to do something slightly different with cauliflower. Simple, but slightly different. Some of you may have tried this, but I tried it the other day and I thought, this is so simple and delicious. Now, one of the things I talk about quite often is that when you adopt a plant-based lifestyle, in many ways, you're retraining your palate because the typical American diet and most diets really around the world are overly sweet and overly salted. So when you take on a plant-based diet, you are learning to appreciate things closer to their natural state. At least that's what you should be working towards, because we've talked about just when you become a vegan, that doesn't mean that everything that you used to eat before, like if you used to eat real bacon, now you're eating vegan bacon. And if you were eating real chicken, now you're eating vegan chicken, all of this processed stuff. We don't want to do that. What we really want to work towards is eating foods as close to their natural state as possible. What happens? You've heard me say this a million times. Your body takes what it needs from it and it gets rid of the rest. It gets the fiber, it gets the nutrition, it gets all of those things, and it gets rid of the rest. When you're eating a lot of processed and preservative-packed foods, it's not cool. So tonight, we are going to do a whole roasted cauliflower. Now, what we're going to do to this simple cruciferous vegetable is we are going to elevate it by infusing flavor into it. There are many ways you can do this. If you are somebody who loves Italian flavors, you're going to chop up some garlic. You're going to use some Italian seasoning, some olive oil, a little bit of salt. You're going to mix all of that together. You're going to brush it over this. You're going to pour it inside the cavity and you're going to roast it. If you're somebody from the islands who likes jerk, you can jerk your cauliflower. If you're somebody who likes adobo, you can use adobo seasoning on this. Whatever you want to do, this cauliflower will take it and it will transform it to a delicious either centerpiece or a side dish. So what I'm going to do this evening, what we're going to do this evening is we are going to use one of my spices. Now, I have 3 that would work perfectly with this. The Habesha spice. You could always use curry. Curry and vegetables always goes wonderful together. You could even use my maple jerk. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my Habesha and I'm going to add a little sweetness to it by using honey. Now, those of you who are familiar with the Habesha people, Eritrea and Ethiopia, you know that honey is quite often used in their cuisine. So that's what we're going to do tonight to our cauliflower. This is super simple. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to take the leaves off of the base of the cauliflower. Now you must be careful not to cut out the core because that's what's holding it all together. And key to the preparation and presentation of this dish is making sure that the cauliflower remains intact. So I'm going to use a paring knife and I'm going to gingerly go around and cut off these pieces. I'm just gonna take my time with it. I'm gonna cut off those larger pieces. See how that's coming off very easily. I'm not going deep. And I'm gonna continue. Take off the little ones. You can actually pull these out. Yeah. Just be gentle. This is the most work that you're really gonna do for this dish. The rest of it is done in the oven. Okay, so now that we've gotten rid of these leaves, we are gonna carefully trim this so that the cauliflower is able to stand, okay? See what I did there? So we just trimmed off the core from which the leaves were coming out of, so this can sit flat. Okay? So that is step one. Step two. Actually, step two, we're gonna put this aside and we're gonna make our marinade, our drizzle, our special something that's gonna go into this dish. So what I'm using is I'm using some avocado oil. Avocado oil is great for you. It's a heart-healthy oil. You can use extra virgin olive oil. You do not want to use canola or vegetable. You want to use something like avocado. This is a high heat oil, and we're going to be roasting this at 400 degrees. So that is why we're using this oil, but it's also great for you. It's heart healthy. So we're using some avocado oil. We're going to use some honey I have. Now, if you are a vegan who doesn't use honey, some vegans don't like to use honey because bees are used in the process of creating honey. That's fine. That's what you want to do. That's fine. I would suggest you use something like maple. You could even use some agave if you wanted to, just something to give a little bit of sweetness to this because the Habesha spice does have heat. Now, if you're using curry, you may not need to use something sweet. You could just use the oil and make a marinade from that. But this one, we definitely want to add a little bit of sweetness to take off that heat. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do, and it depends on the size of your cauliflower, I'm going to use about a quarter to a third cup, or a quarter to a third cup of this oil. This is giving me a hard time. I'm going to use about a quarter cup of honey. Now realize this is going over the entire cauliflower. Okay. Alrighty. Last but not least, we're going to use about a tablespoon and a half to 2 tablespoons of my Afcavé Habesha Spice. We're going to take a whisk and we're going to whisk this together. Now, you may need to add a little bit of water to this because it is going to be thick. We don't want it runny, but we don't want it thick. We want it kind of right in between. So I'm going to add just a touch of water to this. Continue to mix it. So I added maybe about 2 tablespoons of water. This is good. 2 tablespoons of water. This. Perfect. So now what we're going to do, we are going to pour some of this into the base. So we have this cavity that we've cleared up when we've cut off those small leaves. There are a few little tiny ones in there, but they're okay. So this cavity that you see through here, we want to get the marinade into that. So there's 2 things you can do. You can either use a spoon or you could just pour it. I'm just going to pour. Just Pour all around. And you're probably going to use about half of the marinade that you have. It's always good to have more than less marinade, I think, because you never know how much you'll need. And again, this is a small cauliflower, so we're not going to need as much for this. Okay. So I'm going to get my pan ready. I've poured it inside the cavity. Now I'm going to turn it over my dish. Same marinade. I'm going to use a brush, and I'm going to go just like this. I can actually pour and brush. Smarter. Work smarter, not harder. We're just going to make sure we get this all over. I have the other one in the oven baking right now, and it smells divine. So what's going to happen as this cooks, of course, as the cauliflower softens, this flavor is just going to seep in to this. This is delicious on its own. This would be delicious with a green salad, or this would be really nice with some mushrooms. We had some mushrooms that you prepared with like onions and garlic and fresh herbs. That would be really nice. And you can still do your green salad with that. Okay, so I think I've got this pretty well coated. So our oven is set to 400 degrees. And this is going to go into our oven for about 35 to 40 minutes. It really depends on your oven. You know your oven. So it really depends on your oven, but about 35 to 40 minutes. Because what's going to happen is we are putting this in a Dutch oven. We're going to cover it, so it's really going to create a lot of steam, and it's going to steam cook it. So put our top on, and this is going in the oven. I'll be right back. Okay, so that is in the oven. We're going to wait until it's ready for us to take it out. We're going to roast it again for about 35 minutes, and then we're going to put it under the broiler for about 2 to 3 minutes to kind of crisp it up, because it's going to be kind of soft, but we want to give it some crispness as well. So one of the things I wanted to talk with you all about this evening while we're waiting for that is food traditions. And I think it's incredibly important for us to explore food traditions. It's important for us to try things out of our comfort zone. You know, when you grow up in a certain culture and environment, you start to think that everything should be done the way that you do it. And that may not be the case. Actually, that's not the case. Quite often, different cultures have different interpretations of food, and they do things differently. If you look at the Black American culture, and if you look at our food story, much of our food story is a result of survival. Dr. Columbus Batiste and Dr. Eric Walsh have a program called Slave Food. And in Slave Food, they really address how the traditional African American diet really is a disservice to our health. When people were enslaved, they got the leftovers. They got the worst of the worst. And so they used things that were high in fat, things that were high in salt, things that were high in sugar to take away the fact that something was spoiled, to take the flavor away that was a spoiled flavor or something like that. We are now living in a time when we don't have to eat like that, so we shouldn't. And I understand that a lot of those traditions are comforting, But we really need to move away from eating from comfort to eating for health. That is the step that we must make. And if you're a person of color, that's even more important because by and large, we are suffering from a result of our diet. The great thing about it is it's easy to do it. It's easy to change what you eat. You need to get into your mind that you're eating for your future and not for your present. We're living in a time with COVID, we're living in a time of tremendous stress. People are being, we're not in our normal social settings, which a lot of times allow us to kind of let off some steam and relax. So many of us have resorted to food for comfort, and that has resulted in a lot of pounds gained during COVID. So even in that, we need to challenge ourselves to make smarter decisions for our health. Because as I've shared with you, once your health is gone, that's a whole nother issue. So we should be proactive in addressing our health before it becomes an issue. Again, the great thing about it is if food can bring disease, food can bring health. So a lot of what we're cooking on Reclaiming Your Health are steps that you can take for substituting things that don't serve your body and health well to things that do serve your body and your health well. Okay, so I'm going to take a look and see how our oven roasted whole cauliflower is coming along. All right, so we have 35 minutes that we've had this in the oven at 400 degrees, and then about 3 to 4 minutes under the broiler. Now, this pot is very hot, so I'm going to put these on the side so I don't burn myself. And what we're going to do is carefully lift this out and put it on our plate. This is super tender. It is beautiful, and I think it has been perfectly prepared. So now let me move this out the way. It's on the stove. All right, look at that. Beautiful. And so as I always do, we have to zhuzh it up a bit. And to this, I'm gonna just chop up some scallions. You can use chives, you can use scallions. Just gonna add a little bit of color to this. We're gonna sprinkle it over the top. Scallions. And I'm gonna use some of my vegan Parmesan that's gonna go over the top, just to add some of that kind of cheesy umami flavor to it. I mean, can't you see this in the center of your table? It's beautiful, it's beautiful. And then I'm going to, I just have a little bit of my marinade left, and so I'm just gonna drizzle it over it. A little bit more heat and a little bit more sweet. This looks divine. So now, let's taste it. Let me grab a fork. I was so excited preparing this that I didn't have all my, but look at that. I want you all to see what this whole roasted cauliflower looks like. It's lovely. It's lovely. And we flipped it upside down and we poured marinade through the core of it, the cavities, and then we put it on the outside. We covered it and we steamed it basically in a Dutch oven for 35 minutes at 400 degrees. So let's see what happens. Oh my goodness. This is so tender. So tender. Wow. Wow. So I'm going to lift this piece out that I have cut. It is still quite steamy. Still quite steamy. That's our piece. That's yummy. And of course, you would cut a larger piece and just go back in there again, dress up that individual piece. The last little bit of drizzle we have goes on top of it. That's why I said it's always good to have more marinade than not, because you can use it. Put a little bit of micro arugula on that. Isn't that lovely? Lovely little side dish. But let me taste it because it doesn't only, see how tender that is? That's very good. Very good. And literally preparing it this way, a little bit of heat. Preparing it this way, you can use any spice you want. It literally is sucked up by the cauliflower. Cauliflower is one of those things, I'm sure you know if you've had it, it's bland. There's not much flavor to it. But this way we figured out how to get that flavor all through it and elevate your cauliflower. So this is a new dish to add to your repertoire. I would love to hear how you've prepared it, what spices you've used. If you've used my spices, great. If you haven't, that's fine too. We just want to know that you are trying out these things that we're trying to expose you to, things that will lead to a more abundant life and better health. Thank you so much for joining me this evening on Reclaiming Your Health. Just one more look at this beautiful dish. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye.